Okay, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the February 12th meeting of the Advisory on the General Schedule. Just as a reminder to all of the members that are joining virtually, you do have to have your video on to be counted as part of the quorum. To any guests that are joining, you can leave once your schedules have been reviewed and voted on. So we will start by taking roll. Kristen Quinn, Kentucky Office of the Attorney General.
Here.
Gabrielle Sumay, Kenton County Clerk. Jackie Briones, Education and Labor Cabinet.
Yes, I'm here.
Jill Cook.
Here.
And Karen Chrisman. Jill Cook was part of the Personnel Cabinet for the minutes, and Karen Chrisman, Commonwealth Office of Technology.
Here.
Okay, great. We do have a quorum. So the first order of business is to approve the minutes from the November 13th, 2025 meeting. Were there any corrections to the meeting minutes? Okay, if there were no corrections, is there a motion to accept the meeting minutes as is?
I'll move to make a motion to accept the meeting minutes.
Okay, is there a second?
A second.
Okay, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, all opposed, nay. Okay, motion carries. Great, so the next order of business will be the review of the general schedule revisions. Our first revisions up for review are going to be new by David Atha. David, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Taylor. This morning I am presenting a new series for review on the local government general schedule, and it's the Vicious Animal Register file. This came about from a local government agency reaching out to us regarding the record that they create. And the team looked at it and it was determined that an existing series did not adequately cover the type of record. So we are creating this record. Many local governments in Kentucky already have rules regarding animals, whether it be leash laws, registration laws, cleanup laws for their animals, and some also have ordinances regarding vicious animals. And so it's not as prevalent as others, but some local government agencies are using these. These records, the local government agency is able to keep a registration of vicious animals within their localities. They enable the local governments to maintain an accurate registration of vicious animals. This helps in a number of ways. One, if a utility company needs to do work at a property, then they're able to check to see if there's a vicious animal at that property, and then they can check with the owner to say, hey, we're coming over to do some work. Please make sure that your animal is not out. Also, some local government agencies or some local governments require owners of vicious animals to have insurance policies on the animals. So what we're doing is we are going to suggest a 2-year retention, keep the files for 2 years after the file is closed. There are a number of ways that a file can be closed for a vicious animal. One is actually the death of the animal. So if the animal dies, then they keep it for 2 years after its death. Sometimes if an owner turns in an animal to the county or the city, that's another way to close the file. And then sometimes if the owner moves out of the city or the county, then they'll notify the city or county, and then they can close the file and they keep it for those 2 years, then destroy the record. Any questions?
No.
Okay, so no questions or suggestions. So hearing no further discussion, is there a motion to recommend? Actually, no, these are actually going up for review. I apologize. I'm still kind of new at this. So these will go up for review at the upcoming March Commission. And then we'll go through the review of these again and recommend approval for these at the May Advisory General. So again, these are just up for first review by you guys. So thank you, David. I appreciate that. All right. And the next retention schedule revisions we're going to be looking at are with Lance. I believe Lance is on the meeting here virtually. So Lance, whenever you're ready, please go ahead.
You're muted, Lance, if you're talking.
Can you put the grid back up? Like stop sharing? No. Oh, okay. I apologize, everyone.
Okay. All right. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you.
All right, great. Okay. All righty. So anyway, let's see here. Let me pull this thing up real quick.
Should be able to see. Okay.
Okay. All right. I have three new ones coming up for review, and we have L6982 property appraisals. Let's see, this record series documents formal written estimates of value for real and tangible property acquired, owned, leased, sold, or otherwise disposed by a local government agency. This is mostly real estate and buildings, but can also include non-real estate items such as machinery, vehicles, and furniture. Series may contain property address and legal description, description of improvements, photos of the property and improvements, sketch of the parcel of land, public or private land use restrictions, analysis of the best use of the land, valuation methodology used to determine value, market value, value of the buildings on the land, appraisers information, and related information. For non-real estate items may include manufacturer's information, original purchase documents, and insurance information. Retention and disposition, retain until superseded or property is no longer owned by local government agency, whichever is first, and then destroy. Any questions on that one?
And look like it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Alrighty. And let's see here. Next up, we have the iReadable exemption file, which is one for us, L6983. This series documents an agency's petition to the state archivist to maintain scanned, permanently valuable public records without
Uh-oh, I think we froze.
state archivist response certification from electronic records branch that the local agency's computer system meets KITS standards, and periodic review by KDLA staff. Retention and disposition, retain. Any questions about that one?
You froze a little bit, so I think if you don't mind, I'm just
No.
gonna say that this has been
Um,
presented previously and there were no changes or comments received during the review period.
Okay, alrighty. Okay. So, I guess there's no questions about it or anything. All
No.
right, cool. Okay. All right, well, we shall move on then. Okay, and lastly, we have L6984, controlled substances for canine training and inventory log. Function and use. This record series documents possession and use of controlled substances for canine training purposes and is used to inventory drugs on hand, Per federal DEA and 21 CFR 130404, a record must be kept of all controlled substances received, administered, dispensed, or professionally used other than by prescription. Inventories are required to be audited every 2 years. Most agencies are registered with DEA to receive and keep controlled substance inventories for this purpose and are so bound by these requirements. Access restrictions are a little bit different on this one. Personal information per KRS 61878-1A. Agencies should contact legal counsel regarding open records matter. Series may contain drug name and weight quantity, inventory or sample number, name and address of vendor or agency from whom it was received, case number if drug was taken from evidence, date of disposal or transfer, canine name, trainer, personnel name, time and date of training, person signing in or out drugs from inventory, witness and related information, retention and disposition, retain for 2 years minimum and then destroy, retain longer in the event of ongoing litigation. Okay, any questions on that one?
Nope, it doesn't look like it. So if there's no questions or no suggestions, is there a motion to recommend approval for these revisions for the upcoming commission?
I have a general question.
Yeah.
So I know that we saw these at the commission meeting. So I'm a little confused about the process that we're doing.
So, for the general schedules for local and state agencies, the process is to introduce them to the commission as under review. And then we have a quarter, 3 months for, public comment where the proposed revisions are on our website. There's a form that can be completed for anyone who, would like to ask a question or make a comment on the proposed revisions. And that's because since these retention schedules apply to such a huge amount of agencies and personnel, this gives as much of an opportunity as possible for anyone who isn't able to attend these meetings to actually review those, since they are most likely to be directly affected by it. And then at the next commission meeting, assuming there are no larger changes or revisions or anything's not tabled, these revisions are again presented for final approval. So you have the first one saying, the first presentation saying, this is what we're working on, this is what's going to the public for their review, and then the second commission meeting to say approve or not approve.
So we haven't had any comments or anything
No.
concerning these. Okay.
No, there's no comment that came in during the public comment period.
And so just as another example with David, since those are new, we're going to present them to the commission as under review, then they'll go up for comment, and then we'll present them again in June for final approval.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Thanks, Kristen. Okay, so so again, hearing no further discussion, is there a motion to recommend approval on these revisions?
I will so move.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, motion carries. Great. Thanks, Lance.
Thank you.
Okay, great. And so the final part of our business, oh, I apologize. Final part of our business is going to be a continued discussion regarding State Series M002 routine correspondence with Catherine Giles.
So at our previous meeting, there was a question of if we could determine when the retention was put in place as retained no longer than 2 years. And from what I've been able to find, that is the original retention for the original series of general correspondence. So it looks like our first retention for state agencies was in 1981 or 1980, and the retention period was retained no longer than 2 years. The front matter did describe general correspondence as correspondence which is not crucial to the preservation of the administrative history of the agency. It is generally of a non-policy nature and without permanent value. It deals only with the general operations of the agency, operations which are better documented by other records maintained by the agency. General correspondence should be retained no longer than 2 years. Official correspondence should be screened from these files periodically and prior to any records destruction. And so as updates were made to the general schedule throughout, that retention kind of retained no longer than 2 years until 2006, September 2006, when it was presented and approved, tentatively approved by the commission to revise the retention to retain 2 years. So that approval did come with, let's see, it came with the caveat of basically approving it for now, and then KDLA would need to roll out like 6 months or so worth of training before the actual retention would be implemented. And then the commission would also come back to the approved retention to see if they still wanted to keep it at retained 2 years, which they did not. So then in 2008, the retention was changed back to retain up to 2 years. And the title was changed to routine correspondence instead of general correspondence. I haven't been able to determine why that was, because from what I can tell, KDLA did provide workshops for agency staff, which included the Department for Public Advocacy, Kentucky Retirement Systems. They sent information to agency heads, legal counsel, records officers about the change in retention. I know a big concern were concerns that have already been mentioned here, like the space for maintaining emails, the staff needing to, like just state agency staff in general needing to be responsible for correspondence, but the answers were also kind of the same, like staff is going to be responsible for the records they touch anyway. And regarding space, a lot of that comes from the training of making sure staff do know when to keep records, when to not keep records, because you do have folks who have a tendency to just hoard records. So that's kind of where that is. It started as retain up to 2 years. Although, okay, sorry, I forgot to add. In 2008, when the retention went back to up to 2 years, that is when it was at least indicated in writing that agencies needed to implement policies on how long they intended to keep their routine correspondence, keeping in line with that retain up to 2 years. So that's where we are with that. I would still I'm still advocating for removing that up to. I think the larger question is like how long we want that retention period to be, because, you know, this is maybe one of 2 retentions that we have that isn't a clear-cut retention. It's very inconsistent. It's reliable on agencies to make sure they're deciding and sharing when routine correspondence needs to be destroyed, rather than just having one thing for everyone to use. So I would like to open it up to the members for discussion on that. And if there are any other thoughts on an appropriate retention period, if I think 2 years was kind of too long for some agencies, I think is the thought there when we discussed it last time.
Okay, yeah, let's open this up for discussion then.
I think I had asked because I think in my letter, I had mentioned that it would be thousands of records. And I would even say hundreds of thousands across agencies that would be affected by this retention. Did you come up with a number or some type of guesstimate of what would be impacted?
I was not able to do that. In part because I don't know how to start coming up with that number. Routine correspondence, at least the way we've defined it and understand it, shouldn't be that many emails, frankly, because so much of what agencies do is also just non-business related correspondence, or they're part of a email chain where they aren't responsible for that record. So I wasn't able to get an exact number or figure out how to calculate an exact number, or even a guesstimate. I think a large part of the volume concerns, though, could be answered with training, with KDLA conducting more training on the difference between the correspondences and really emphasizing who's responsible for what. We already have that in an email training, which is that for everybody or is that just for the cabinet? That's on my purpose. Is it for the executive branch or is it?
That's
just
for the
cabinet?
entire executive branch.
Okay, so we do have executive branch training about email correspondence. I mean, it's very brief, but that's something where we can continue to implement trainings or workshops or outreach with agencies so that everyone can understand that a lot of what they're already keeping, they don't need to keep and wouldn't be affected by a set retention like this.
I had a couple things to say. I wasn't, I was at the last meeting, but was having issues with my audio. So a number of the examples that were brought up would be considered informational reference. So I think as it was mentioned in the minutes, we need to do a little more work defining what counts as routine correspondence. Also, we do have a required training for the entire executive branch. That is not everybody, of course, but mostly who will be using the schedule. So we are actively recording other trainings. We are always willing to go to agencies. So a little bit more explanation on our end and on the embedded within the schedule, I think would clear a lot of this up. I don't think it's going to be as many emails quite as we think. That said, one of the other things I wanted to touch on was there were some very short intervals discussed in the last meeting. I just wanted to make my case clear that I think anything from the 30 to 90 day range, we might as well close these records, because by the time news reaches the public, who is what we care about in this case, in terms of public response or public inquiry through open records requests, I think we want to keep it a length of time where we could actually supply the emails. Anything else, I think, is going to erase transparency as an option. So I don't know what that length of time would be. Ultimately, it's what people will be comfortable with, but I think a year's time down to 6 months, it's really up to everybody. But I think anything in the very short time frame, why even keep any emails, because we cannot supply them by the time the public are aware of any issues.
Nara,
I think the shift should be from transparency to efficiency, because most of the emails that you're referring to are not open to public disclosure under the Open Records Act. A lot of them are preliminary public correspondence that doesn't lead to a final agency action is considered not confidential, but not subject to the Open Records Act. So a lot of the emails that you are referring to are not open to public disclosure. So I just think, and regardless of whether they would be subject to disclosure, and a records custodian would still have to go through them if someone asked for them. So if you're talking about 2,000 records, 2,000 emails, a records custodian would still have to go through all of the responsive records. And if we're talking about a 2-year period, it would probably be more than that. And if we're talking about multiple people within the agency concerning a specific subject, it would be more than that. And so a records custodian would have to still go through every single email and say what is responsive, what is not responsive, and what is exempt and not exempt. And a large majority of the internal preliminary emails are exempt.
But those.
So if we're focusing on transparency, I don't think this would help with transparency.
I think that the correspondence you're talking about would not fall within routine correspondence though. So those emails, those letters or memos or correspondence would be part of a different retention period anyway. Because if it's going to be part of, okay, I always fall back on licensing as my go-to example.
Can we pull up the routine correspondence definition as it is right now? Because I disagree.
I would say a fixed retention period would be in the public's interest simply so that all agencies are abiding by the same time period, whatever that time frame is. We shouldn't have it up to, we should have a defined time frame for that purpose. Because somebody puts a request to CHFS, well, our policy is 30 days. Somebody puts it to the AG's office, our policy is 60 days. That's going to be confusing for the public to know how long they're going to have to request records in general, whether they're exempt or not. A fixed is going to help make it clear for the public how much time they have to request these things, or how long they should expect them to be in existence. So still think a fixed time period, one way or the other, really should be what we have rather than an up to 2 years.
And there's also non-business correspondence that needs to be evaluated as well, given the fact that those are two of the main correspondence formats that we find. Some of it does also still fall into non-business correspondence. And I do want to make the point of advocating for Sarah Garrett's email deleting workshop that she does. She goes to agencies and actually helps them physically go through those emails so that the burden is much less. She can go through and, work with them to identify what correspondence is what, so that can actually be disposed of properly. She can talk about it if she wants to further. I know she's here on this meeting, but I do want to at least advocate for that as well.
Do you all see the retention schedule on your screens?
Sorry, I cut you off, Catherine, but could you give the example that you're about to give?
Just like licensing. If you have a license file for, say, the alcoholic beverage control, and the licensee, you have correspondence with that licensee about something related to their license or their file, that's not going to be routine correspondence. That's going to fall within, that's going to take on the retention of that license file, because that's the record for it. Even though correspondence is happening, that doesn't mean it's always routine correspondence. Routine correspondence that we receive is a lot of how do I request a court record. And then we advise, here's who you need to contact to request a court record. Or an agency might ask, how do I request my agency record? Here's how you do it. For us, that's routine. It doesn't affect policy. It's not really action oriented. It's just communicating with our customer service or our customer base, how they do a thing, what a process looks like. So that's going to be most staff's routine correspondence. Anything outside of that, if someone were to ask further, if they were going to ask for help in research, or if someone submits an open records request, those are different. Those would not fall within routine correspondence. And then those are when if you're looking for responsive records, you're looking for those specific files, not necessarily just blanket routine correspondence.
And the state records administrators, myself and Joe, we have been trying to add correspondence into the contents of each and every agency specific series so that it is well understood that any correspondence that goes along with that record is within that record and should follow that retention.
So, open records, for example, you're saying that every email that or let's say the records custodian has with the requester, every email that the records custodian has with each member or each staff member to locate the records, the emails sending the records, like all of those emails are for the file of the open records request and not routine correspondence. So
Right.
internal emails that are referenced within routine correspondence that are day-to-day activities are something that isn't specifically about a file or a business that's going on within the agency.
That's how
I'm just a little confused.
That's how we determine what routine correspondence is. So caveat, definitely not an attorney. I'm definitely not going to advise the Attorney General's office on how to handle open records requests.
No,
but,
I'm just trying to understand like what you all are trying to say routine correspondence is, because it says internal day-to-day activities, and then it says or internal communication, and I can't think of any other communication that isn't. If you're saying that if it has anything to do with a business related thing that would go within a file, then I can't think of really anything that's routine correspondence that's internal that would promote transparency other than, let's go to lunch, which, I mean, that seems like it's not even business related, so it wouldn't even be routine correspondence. I'm just trying to understand what it sounds like. The definition that you're giving has everything in my email has to do with something, that I'm working on.
Examples I can think of are when I email our staff to ask for their drafts for the commission. That's routine correspondence. The email itself asking for the draft or the email of them sending me the draft is not really important to the business of the agency. The documents themselves, those will be saved as part of the meeting materials that get distributed. I think a lot of internal discussions about what are your thoughts on this iReadable exemption policy? Do we need to reword that? That's a little bit more routine because the actual final draft, that draft is going to be the final product. That's going to be the document that is what is of interest, to,
And-
it remains
yeah.
on file.
Sounds
So
like the
you're
issue-
saying, so you're saying internal discussions about, like preliminary internal discussions about final agency actions that haven't occurred yet are routine to come up with, you know, it just sounds like you're describing, you know, the preliminary records that are exempt, and we're talking about trying to expand transparency, but that wouldn't expand.
I think because like, I think because the Attorney General's office in particular, maybe just doesn't have a lot of routine correspondence.
I think that's the issue.
Is
I
a
think
huge
That's
issue,
the issue.
or a huge, differentiation here, because so, like, so much of our routine correspondence, I mean, genuinely is not much more than, well, I won't say that.
I can give an example. So I have, between myself and the commissioner, there's several layers, so I'm way low. Okay, so I'm trying to say this as like most people that we may be creating this series for. I get the public who reach out to me about the research room downstairs, or about maybe I receive a voicemail for a local records administrator instead. Like that would be more of my considered routine correspondence, or when I'm working with the electronic records administrator on an iReadable exemption, that's more routine correspondence that I'm doing. I don't really create a lot of final product, but I think that we're talking about a lot of people who do create a final product. This, I think, should be considered for everyone within every state agency who's just creating those general day-to-day things. That's really who we want to create this series for and keep this series for. So I'm just
But
going to use that example.
when I think about, we have close to 400 people within our agency. And when I think about all of the 400 people and them being responsible for maintaining all of those records, which, I mean, we're having a hard time figuring out, you know, what is routine correspondence, or at least, you know, I'm trying to figure it out, and I'm an attorney. And they are responsible for maintaining their routine correspondence. And if they don't, we could be fined if there's an open records request for it and someone knows that it exists and they don't have it. It's with it. I mean, even think about 2 years, email from 2 years ago. So I had a situation where someone was asking for an email. It was routine correspondence. I had deleted it because I was done with it was within the agency. I was looking for it. I believe it had been, I don't think it was necessarily email. It was a document that we received that was discarded because it wasn't a part of the agency, or like it was not a business of the agency. It wasn't anything that we did. And, you know, if we had to have kept that within a 2-year period, we just get a lot of stuff. You know, we get a ton of things. And to be responsible for all of those things within the 2-year period that has nothing to do with our business, and we could get fined for it. And even thinking about all of the 400 people within our agency that get things and emails, I don't know. It's concerning. It just seems like a lot of liability I mean, we're saying that it's for transparency, but a lot of things that you're describing that are routine are exempt. So if the purpose is transparency, and if we're talking about the small number of routine correspondence for instance, our 400 people, it doesn't seem like that would promote transparency. I think, you know, that it's about efficiency, and I don't think that 2 years, and, you know, I forget who it was. He said 30 to 90 days would not be enough time. And I just think, honestly, anything over 30 days would be overly burdensome.
And that's I think that's what we need to come at. So 2 years only suggested because the current retention is up to 2 years. And I just wanted to get rid of the up to. So 2 years is what it is once you get rid of the up to. I think what you're describing is already happening with that up to, because people don't know how long to keep a record, correspondence. Perhaps their agency doesn't know that they needed to, which, you know, that's part of like an outreach, a training, a communication thing. But I think a lot of agencies maybe don't realize that they need to, as an agency, need to have a policy of what up to is. So I think you're still right now probably going to have a lot of state employees who are just deleting or not deleting because the current retention as it is up to 2 years is just confusing. It's not easy to point to and say that's the retention, because up to just contains that's 2 years worth of like potential confusion there. So it doesn't, I don't think we're like stuck on 2 years in particular. I do think that here at KDLA, we don't agree that anything less than 90 days or even 6 months would be a good idea. I would personally suggest 1 year as a good medium average compromise to start with. 1 year would certainly be less than 2 years. It's already part of a lot of people's workflow where they review things after a year, whether it's a calendar year or a fiscal year. So routine correspondence can be part of that. I think where there are some routine correspondence where it's not quite as lengthy as some constituent records are, but maybe still needed for, like, if we're talking about drafts or work we're doing internally, I think most agencies would still need at least 1 year to go back and have something to refer to, whether that's for the public or internally.
This also just looks like setting up, here's my 2025 routine correspondence folder.
Yes,
And I click and drag all my routine correspondence emails into this folder.
or create.
And that is the onus we're putting on the individual, right? Is to create a folder or some sort of records management stuff. It is on each individual to maintain their own records, right? And all this is them dragging their email over to that folder at maybe each week, each month, or whatever they want to do, whatever intervals they want to do,
Yeah.
right?
We do try to train as
Yeah.
that.
It's a very simple records management process, right? So
Yeah.
it's not like we're
Yeah.
asking.
Sarah's got a list of trainings for that.
You're saying that it's simple, but right now it's up to, and after you're done with it, you can delete it. And that's within our open records decisions. I don't think for me, there's no confusion about that, because I think the confusion is what is routine correspondence, and then imagining 400 employees going through their email every month. Like, we have some people who get 50 emails a day, going through every month and going through and trying to figure out, okay, what is routine correspondence, and putting it in a folder and them being responsible for that. Well, honestly, it's not them responsible, it's the agency responsible, because if we get an open records request and they don't have it, then we get fined. Or, you know, we have an angry person who is looking for something that is probably exempt. You're saying that it is helping, but I think it would cause more confusion.
I think it again goes to the fact that it would be helpful for most agencies, but we do recognize that there are going to be other agencies where it's not a great, like, 1 year is still too long, because to your point, like, you have a lot of routine correspondence that is a little maybe more involved, but not quite to the level of involvement as like a case file or something. So that is something that is true, but I think where we've provided examples of other routine correspondence that's going to be similar to what most state personnel are going to be dealing with. I think for them to have something that is a flat retention period, that's the key thing. And then if we can agree that we need a flat retention period, then I think that can let us better discuss like what that retention period should be, whether it should be 30, 60, 6 months, a year, or something else. Although we still don't think it should be less than 6 months over here, I don't think. And that's where we can look into what the best retention period for most agencies on routine correspondence would be.
Is routine a bad name for this series? Because it sounds like some people's routine is not creating routine correspondence, it's creating other official correspondence. It's
What
not
else
right.
would you call it?
It was originally called general correspondence.
Yeah.
Of course.
Well, so what's the purpose of routine correspondence? Something that doesn't have it doesn't have a final say in a decision, right? So maybe we rename it something towards that or something, right? I don't know. I'm just saying maybe the fact that it's called routine correspondence is confusing a lot of people. When there are a lot of people whose routine isn't routine correspondence, is they're creating official correspondences in other manners, right?
It's fair.
Because it sounds like certain records officers who only deal with open records requests would never have routine correspondence in their day-to-day business beyond, hey, what time's this meeting, or.
But an analyst or an administrator or someone
Yeah.
lower might still have
Still
those.
have it.
Yes,
still get-
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cause like, a lot of my routine correspondence is, a local government agency going, hey, what's the email address to submit a truck certificate to?
Yeah, I receive a lot of, just transfer questions. Yeah, so those are still all very much routine for us.
I believe the intent for naming it routine was because there was official correspondence and general correspondence. And then general correspondence was broken out into routine and non-business correspondence to kind of differentiate that there's correspondence that, yes, based on the definition of a public record, it kind of is still a record because you get it, whether it's from like a vendor or training or whatever, but that's not really routine for our purposes. And then routine correspondence is something else. So yeah, we could consider a different name if that would be a good, you might want to punch.
Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely.
If that could be helpful, although I don't know, like at this time, what else you would call it. I think like ultimately it does come down to, is our definition clear on what routine correspondence is? And to one of your points where routine correspondence for us is not the same as routine correspondence for someone else, then we need to define what that is, where it's for most agencies, what routine correspondence is. Do we need to go back to general correspondence? Do we need to go back to, I don't know.
It sounds like the Attorney General's example of what they deal with is an extreme one, as with some of the local, cities who do have 2-year retention. Louisville Metro, that's massive. So I don't know. Do we still think it's a good idea to have a fixed time across the board
Yeah.
for everybody based on? Okay, so
Yeah,
I wasn't trying to say transparency is the whole thing, but efficiency, part of that, I know I have to go back to my own emails, which would include mostly routine correspondence in my position, going back to them to get information, vital information. And so everyone's administrative need is going to look a little different for different correspondence. So I'm trying to think, I don't think renaming it is going to help much of anything, but further explanation into what counts as routine correspondence is a must. And that could be included, in the general schedule's front matter and perhaps in the entry for it. I'm okay. I don't know that 2 years is essential for every agency. Like you mentioned, I could drop it down to a year and be comfortable. Anything less than that, though, I think for operations, needing to go back and read your own email search should someone internally request information. Oh, I'm sorry, it's gone. Again, that's gonna vary by agency, but I think, we don't wanna hamstring ourselves by not being able to reply, by making the retention so short that affects your operations. And it is going to look different based on what your agency does. I could definitely see the Attorney General having so many that you want to, you have a perceived need to make it shorter, but the vast majority of executive branch agencies do develop a lot of routine correspondence. Like, it's hard to even quantify. We do need to further define it, but just this morning, I needed to order some supplies. So there's a email chain now involving that. I mean, that is routine correspondence. It is preliminary before we make the purchase order, but, yeah, I don't even really want to use the word preliminary for all routine correspondence, because this is your actual internal work you are doing. It is not leading towards something else. And we're not just building files. All of my correspondence is not being filtered into a record series later on that exists. Many do, and I do stand by what they said with that. But a lot of it is simply something that we may need to look back to, or say someone else becomes part of the workflow that we didn't anticipate, forward that chain to them so they can read up and act accordingly. So I think shortening it to a number of days would be terribly inefficient, ineffective. So I think a year, maybe even slightly less, would be acceptable. I don't agree it has to be 2 years for everybody, but I just want to make sure the retention lasts long enough to actually serve the agency, to say nothing about transparency, which I think is still there.
I do want to bring up Karen's point from the last meeting about how Outlook 365 is very robust. There's retention policies you can set for emails. There's a lot of ways that you can manipulate your own Outlook 365 to be able to help you be more efficient. So there is also an understanding that anyone who's working in an email environment could have the possibility of working through some of those efficiencies. And maybe that's upon us to look at further. Not sure.
Is this meeting only an
I'm not sure. I think I said it for an hour.
hour? Well, if it's okay, since we're heading
6
toward
minutes
the
towards.
end of the hour, are there any questions or other research that we can do on our end? Whether that's, I genuinely don't think I'd be able to work or guess a volume of routine correspondence across the state, but is there anything else that we could bring back to the next meeting for discussion that you'd like us to look into, anyone?
Maybe if you could come up with a better definition, like a draft of a better definition, that would be helpful.
And I do think that this will be a discussion that will take a few more meetings. Like, I certainly wasn't expecting us to like fully conclude anything today. So I hope that next time we'll be able to talk more, and then the meeting after that, we'll be able to talk more about routine correspondence and try to get to something. I mean, again, I think the main thing is removing up to or no longer than 2 years. I think that language just, I think there's more liability there than a flat retention. So that's my main goal. Obviously, if no one agrees with that, then we won't proceed, but I just want to be candid, that's my aim.
Can I add to that, that I think maybe defining a better trigger overall might be a better idea for this. So the trigger of that 1 year or 2 years or however much longer it is.
So like the inside creation.
Yeah. So maybe at the end of administrative value, like we had talked about in the last meeting.
I think I would be able to further discuss this when I have a better understanding of what routine correspondence is, because I think after this meeting, I feel like more strongly that routine correspondence really has no value beyond like the immediate need, administrative need, me ordering something and having communications about ordering something. I don't think has any administrative need after the purchase, after it's been ordered. And I may be wrong because I don't deal with that kind of routine correspondence. And I'm having a hard time thinking about what type of routine correspondence that I actually deal with. But anything that I can think of, I don't believe has any purpose in retaining for honestly longer than I needed, longer than I've needed to discuss it. I've never had to go back through my records to give someone something that was insignificant like routine correspondence. Maybe for my own purposes to remind me of something, but when I think about setting up meetings, there are, actual meetings that happen. There are notes, there are other things that routine correspondence leads to that helps me remember whatever it is that I'm communicating about. So I don't know. I just need a better definition so I understand the purpose of why we are trying to maintain these records for longer than, the administrative need.
We will work on that.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing really just comes back to having a set retention period that anybody within the state can look at and go, okay, I need this for 1 year. That way, every person knows exactly what's expected rather than, is it 90 days? Is it 30 days? Is it 60 days? Is it 2 weeks? It's just creating a solid definitive time period that a new hire we just brought in, who just onboarded, will know, okay, this correspondence needs to be kept for a year, and then I can delete it. And then that way, if they transfer between agencies, the expectation is still the same regardless of what agency they're with. Rather than, once again, if your agency at the AG's office only keeps it for 30 days, but CHFS keeps it for a year, when you move between agencies, there's going to be that issue for that person knowing how long they need to hold on to. Just create something uniform that every state employee can apply is the biggest thing I think we're really trying to get to.
All right, with that, and thank you, Drew, for that. It is 11, so does anyone want to make a motion for adjournment? We are absolutely still going to talk about this at our next meeting, but is there a motion to adjourn?
I will make that motion.
Thank you, Karen. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Okay. So then, just all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Okay. All opposed? Okay. All opposed? Nay. Okay. Motion carries. Thank you again, everybody, for the discussion, and we will see you